work.
Good afternoon. I'm Deb Hutton in for Amanda Galbraith, who's off for a couple of weeks, enjoying some well-deserved vacation time. Coming up at 12:50, we're going to talk with Mike Savage, who's the mayor of Halifax. That will be installment number 4, or stop number 4, on the Cross Canada road trip. Every Friday with a mayor of one of each of our 13 provinces and territories, and find a little bit out about their city and what there is to do and see and participate in when you're there. But before we get to that, let's talk gas prices. If you're heading away this weekend, if you're heading up north, out east, down south, wherever you're going, obviously with the price at the pumps is a concern. Earlier this week on Wednesday, U.S. President Joe Biden called on Congress to suspend the federal gasoline and diesel taxes for 3 months. Now, this makes him the sixth of the G7 countries to take a look, if he's successful through Congress, to take a look at some form of gas tax holiday. The UK, Italy has both taken this approach. Germany has lowered their gas taxes. France has offered a consumer rebate. And Japan has given us subsidies to wholesalers. But that will make, if successful, Canada the only country in the G7 who will not have done some form of gas tax break. Joining us this afternoon to talk about this is very popular Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, and of course the person who runs gaswizard.ca, our very popular site to tell us where we can get gas and what's going to happen. Welcome to Free for All Friday, Dan.
Good to be here, Deb. Thanks for having me this afternoon.
Well, so let's talk, first of all, before we get into the specifics of a tax holiday or some form of relief, let's talk about where we are with gas prices today in terms of the specifics, but also where you see the trend heading.
I think we're obviously in the $2 range pretty much across the country, some above, some slightly below. Tax differentials account for much of that. And I think we're going to be range bound in this area for the next week or so until summer really kicks in and we get refineries saying they're having trouble keeping up with demand, and we see the usual effects of things like hurricanes in the U.S. Gulf Coast to whether or not there is a sufficient amount of energy to go around, not just of course in North America but in other parts of the world. And so we're to a large extent really driven by external circumstances, even though Canada plays a very important role, or potentially could, were it to release some of the massive reserves it has for both natural gas and oil. But for want of killing pipelines in this country, we're a small bit player.
And I'd like to spend a little bit more time talking about that in a couple of minutes. But what is happening then throughout the country? So we're going to talk about a potential for a national response to this. But throughout the provinces, for example, in Ontario, next Friday, I believe, we get a bit of a gas rebate happening. What else is happening throughout the other provinces?
Well, other provinces have taken measures that involve either rebate or direct decreases in their taxes. Newfoundland dropped 7 cents a litre. That's a part of the country which is very hard pressed as far as finances. They did something. Quebec offered a rebate of up to $500 that could go to pretty much anyone, even those who didn't drive. So that'd be interesting how they managed that. There must be an election coming there. As you mentioned, Ontario will be dropping gasoline 5.7 cents a litre, or that works up to 6.44 cents a litre with HST. Alberta, of course, being the big one, dropped gas taxes back in the beginning of April, a total of 13 cents a litre plus GST. That's 13.6 cents a litre. And, of course, British Columbia, which offered what I thought was a pittance, $100 off your rebate from your insurance. So not a lot to really, shield you against the $2.20 that you're paying compared to $1.50 this time last year in that province. But, yes, governments have, in varying degrees at the provincial level tried to do something, while the federal government, of course, is continues to put more pressure on prices, having on April 1st increased carbon taxes in this province 2.5 cents a litre here in Ontario.
And of course, the Conservatives federally are calling on the Liberals, they have for months, to either cut gas taxes, lift the GST from gasoline, suspend the carbon price, or the 10 cents a litre federal excise tax. All ideas that could be considered by the federal government. What about argument? Sorry, Dan, what about the argument that when you do this as a government, the gas companies come in and sort of fill that room. So you take it down 10 cents, they put it up 10 cents. Any truth to that, given how much you watch these things and how closely you watch these things?
Not at all. And in fact, the fact that we are watching, and I'm not the only one, there's others that are doing what I'm doing, you'd be able to tell very quickly who's ripping who off and who wasn't passing it on. Look, the best example we have is what I saw in Newfoundland. Prices dropped 7 cents a litre. The government had proposed it. Within a day or so, the price had dropped 7 cents net. Now, the market fluctuates, so that sometimes gives people a bit of a false impression. Ditto for Alberta. That's an argument that I would have made back in 1997, 1998, when I wrote a report on gasoline pricing saying it had happened in 1992 in New Brunswick. But it took months for everyone to catch up and realize they'd been ripped off because there was no one benchmarking gas prices way back then. And so, since about 1998, it's pretty simple to call who and whoever offside and who's making what. So I don't buy that argument, and I think the evidence more recently with taxes dropping on fuel has in fact passed on. In the case of the states, though, Deb, my concern is if the problem is that your demand is exceeding supply, dropping gas prices, as laudable as that might mean, apart from revenue shortages and you'll have to cut somewhere, you're likely to increase demand and thus contributing to an even greater problem, and really miss the intended purpose of the tax price or the tax cut. So I think it's a very serious situation. We're dealing with a supply crunch, not a demand problem, but in fact, supply is not meeting demand, and there's a whole host of reasons for that.
So I said we would turn to this, so let's do that now. It's a great segue. Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy, is joining us to talk about gas prices and the fact that if the United States is successful, if President Biden is successful in taking a gas tax holiday, Canada will be the only national government of the G7 who will have not addressed gas prices directly. So on the supply issue, what can be done to actually, given the issue of pipelines that you addressed, what can be done to quickly get more supply throughout the country?
Well, the second thing that the Biden administration is doing, which is well worth noting, is to remove the restrictive regulations during summer. As summer temperatures kick in, temperatures get warmer, you need to switch and convert your gasoline to a more expensive regulation, or more what they call a spec, that is a little bit more expensive to make. You also you're required to blend so much ethanol. All those things would not need to be done, and theoretically that would lead to a circumstance where there would be a greater availability of supply. The problem, however, is bigger than that, and it's not something that happened overnight, but we've seen 3 or 4 refineries closed in the U.S. Northeast, including one that played no small part in the U.S. Northeast market. By the way, that Northeast market I'm referring to is New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Boston, and the like, Washington. The largest area in the world, concentrated area in the world that uses more fuel than anywhere else. You can't even compare it to China or Los Angeles or anything like that. The loss of those refineries, much of it due to regulations, is the main reason why the United States continues to find itself short of supply. And they're compensating with other refineries. But as I mentioned earlier, they're running at 94, 95% capacity. They are going to break down. And so the fact that the federal government here in Canada isn't willing to help in any way about producing extra product, has taken a position of attacking, finding ways to constrain oil and gas, and more importantly, regulate to the nth degree the fossil fuel industry, I think is not contributing in any way, shape, or form to dropping prices. By the way, the biggest way in which we could drop prices for fuel in Canada would be to build a couple of pipelines, or at least announce them, watch the Canadian dollar soar. Right now it's costing you and I 36 cents a litre because we are no longer the petrodollar as we were in the past.
But that's not a short-term fix, Dan McTeague.
No, the announcement, however, would go a long way to addressing that. The mere fact that you were about to do this, remember, it's always a forward market. They're looking a month or two ahead. If you could say, wave a magic wand and say, hey, we can get these things up and running, I think it would take the speculative element out of oil and gas prices, and perhaps lead to a calming of prices, bringing down of prices. The mere fact that you can displace the 2 million barrels a day that the world is short, and we're relying more vulnerably on countries like Venezuela or Iran, or in this case Russia, to supply, might also have the proper effect of reducing or in strengthening the value of the Canadian dollar. Remember, you're going to build a pipeline.
Dan McTeague, I'm sorry, we are going to have to go on that very negative note, but thank you for giving us some insight as to why we're paying $2 plus at the tanks. Coming